and then you breathe out of your nose.
Tell me a little bit about olive oil. Can I just go to the store, buy a bottle, call it a day?
Olive oil is now so different from what it used to be in the old days. In the old days, there was just one olive oil and it probably wasn't that great. Olive oil has got so much better now thanks to the technology and the farming practice, which is totally different from what it was like even 30 years ago. And people are now thinking about the varieties, just like in wine, how we're interested in, is it Merlot, is it Cabernet, is it Arbequina, is it Picual or whatever. And these different varieties have very, very different flavors. And in the end, what I'm interested in is different uses. So we can use different oils with different foods. And it's crazy how a different oil can transform a dish in such a way that you really would not expect unless you'd actually tried it out.
So there's a lot to unpack there, but first, are you saying that in the last 30 years, we've basically gone, to use an analogy, from instant coffee to single source
It's very
specialty?
It's very much like that. Yeah, we're at the moment there are not a lot of people who are into it like I am, but slowly I can feel that this is happening, and people are beginning to understand that when they look at the label of a bottle of oil, if it has the variety on it, that means something. And they're beginning to understand that they like this variety or they don't like that one. In the old days, that was never mentioned. And the quality of the oil was very different because the milling process was very different. One of the analogies that I use is I showed people when I'm talking about olive oil, a compact disc and a cassette. And the way olive oil used to be made in the old days, or badly made olive oil now, is like a cassette. We can't really hear the music of the olive oil, whereas in modern, beautiful, clean stainless steel mills, like with a CD, the different characteristics of the olive are expressed and are coming out in exciting ways.
What is it then about the way the modern olive oil is made that's made such a transformative difference in the way that the producers express the notes and the way that we taste oil?
Because we no longer really use a press. People still talk about pressing their olives and stuff, etc. We use centrifuges and stainless steel crushers and stuff. The fact that we're no longer using those presses means that everything about the process is cleaner. It's about hygiene, but it's also about freshness. So when I first made olive oil in 1986 in Italy, my neighbor told me to wait 10 days before we actually took our olives that we'd picked into the mill. Now, it's like 3 hours. Wow. And that freshness is something that you can really smell and taste.
In that case, is there a difference in terms of which variety we would take right away versus 10 days later? Or we basically, whatever olive we pick, we want to get it in there and produced as quickly as possible and preserve the freshness?
It's vital that the olives are as fresh as possible when they're crushed and made into oil. Because as soon as you pick an olive, it starts to ferment. And you wouldn't smell or taste that after 3 or 4 hours, but you would after a day, and more so the longer the olives hang around before they get crushed.
So this is a universal thing. Get it in there quickly, produce the oil, and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Absolutely. They have to, I keep repeating the word fresh, but we can smell that freshness. We talk about freshly cut grass, or imagine you're cutting up a lettuce just about to make a salad. That fresh green smell is what we need in an extra virgin. If it's not there, it's a problem, and it's probably not extra virgin.
And off camera, I had an opportunity, you allowed me the opportunity, I should say, to experience that freshness for myself, and it's extraordinary the difference you get from a high quality oil versus something you might pick up at your local supermarket.
Absolutely.
Off camera, I used the word lubricant to describe an oil that was maybe produced, just to be generous to some people in modern times, but let's say in ancient Greece, for example. Is that fair?
Well, in the very, very old days when people were making olive oil in ancient Greece, they were mostly burning it in lamps. They were putting it on their bodies. The athletes were putting it on their bodies, cleaning their bodies using a thing called a stridola, I think it's called. Anyhow, it doesn't really matter. The idea of using olive oil for food in those days was kind of the last thing they would have thought of, because the oil was so badly made, it was made in such dirty conditions that the flavors were pretty terrible. So when they first started eating olive oil, they would infuse it with garlic and herbs. So they would put those in a pan with the oil and gently heat it up until those flavors got sucked into the oil, because the oil was so filthy.
So we kind of need to get away from this notion, this maybe romantic notion, that the good old days of olive oil and traditional pressing and all this, and recognize that the best oil that's ever been produced is in the here and now.
Exactly. It's, for somebody who's very nerdy about olive oil like me, it's so exciting now to see that olive oil is getting better and better every day, every year, certainly. And unfortunately, sometimes when people talk about olive oil, for example, on Netflix, instead of showing us the modern machinery, which might look boring, they show us the old mills with the donkeys going round in a circle with a granite wheel and the old presses. And I've had people on my olive oil tour saying to me, that looks disgusting. And I say, well, it is disgusting. It's impossible to make great oil using those old presses.
And that's because some of the bits of olive you can never truly get out, or is there more to it than that? Or?
Yeah. I mean, those mats are like doormats. So imagine that you are massaging like guacamole or hummus into a doormat if you've gone crazy. And then the next day you try and clean it. Those little pieces of food are stuck, in this case olives, are stuck in the mat, and it's impossible to get them out. And they sit there in the air, in the oxygen, and ferment and make a smell like vinegar. So it's impossible.
Say no more. Can you touched on the subject a little bit. Back in the day, they would put things like garlic in the oil, heat it to infuse the oil with some of those flavors. But you allude to the fact that olive oil as a flavor enhancer today is something completely different than that.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, I fell in love with olive oil in 1982 when I went to Italy, and that was made with a press, but it was 10 times better than any oil you could buy in the supermarket. And it probably had some problems, but I didn't notice them because I wasn't a taster. But it had a vibrant green freshness to it, as well as possibly some defect. And I had that in a soup with beans and lentils and chickpeas, and even on a steak. They used this oil in this house in Italy almost like a sauce on top of the steak. And it blew me away. But until the late 90s, the way olive oil was made was still fairly dirty. And then they started cleaning the whole thing up. And as I said before, the stainless steel mills just make the oil so much better.
You just made my mouth water a little bit with the steak, with the olive oil drizzle imagery. But just to sort of drill down on this a little bit more, we're still not talking about infusing the oil with certain aromas that come from external factors. We're talking about, just like in wine, a bouquet of aromas that remind you of something else, but that are endogenous, I guess, to the oil itself.
So it is quite extraordinary. One of my very favorite oils from Italy is made from a variety called Itrana, and it's a kind of table olive. And if you pick it green, possibly slightly changing color, all olives go black in the end, by the way. That oil smells like tomatoes and tomato leaves. So it does not have tomatoes in it. The nature of that particular variety of olive makes olive oil that smells and tastes of tomatoes. So it's kind of a crazy thought that in Europe, that smell was there of tomatoes before we had even discovered America and tomatoes. It's just a molecule.
That is super interesting to think about. So these are the kinds of things you as a professional taster would look for in an oil, and then I would guess that every variety of oil has its own sort of defining cluster of notes.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And in fact, I mean, I have judged in, I don't know, maybe 6 different competitions. So let's taste this, which is a lovely piqual. And I'm going to show you how we taste in the competitions that I judge in. And first of all, let's just give it a sniff. And it's got a wonderful fresh smell.
Oh my God.
Goes straight up.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
it hits you.
Yeah, but I know it's a warm day, but we can warm it up by putting the flat of our hand on top and using that to rub the cup against the other hand.
And that does what?
It warms it up, and you're also doing that thing that people do in a way, the swirly business with wine. No? So more oil is exposed to the air, so that when we decide to smell it, you go and you get more smell. If you do it in the winter, you can sometimes feel the cold of the oil through the bottom of the cup. It's too cold, so you need to warm it up like this, and the flat of your hand, because you're sealing the smell in, trapping it in. And when it's warm and ready to smell...
That's profound. I mean...
Profound. It's very important you haven't been stroking a dog, or, you know, your hand should smell of Igor and mine should smell of Johnny, because otherwise we get confused. So one last sniff. We can do a quicker version at another stage. And now I'm going to show you how to taste. So I'm going to take a bit of oil in my mouth, move it around and make two noises. At the front, and then around the sides. Swallow a tiny bit of oil. I'll get a bit of pepperiness, so be warned, it's going to be a bit peppery. And then breathe out of my nose. That's very important, so then the aromas all open up. And then you breathe out of your nose. And it just opens up. The pepperiness can be a bit shocking if you've not done it before, but it's telling you it's made of beautiful fresh olives and a clean mill. Everything about this is clean, green, intense.
That tastes like something else entirely
from what you buy normally in the store. The freshness is just on another level.
Wow.
One of the competitions I judge in is in Japan, called Olive Japan. And that is the only competition I judge in where they tell you the variety of the oil that you are tasting. They don't tell you who made it or where it comes from, obviously, but the variety. And this is quite important. So, for example, going back to this variety Itrana, this Italian variety, which typically smells and tastes of tomato, if on my tasting schedule that they give me, it says Itrana and it doesn't smell of tomato, then I would penalise it, because characteristic of that oil is that it smells of tomatoes. If it doesn't, it's not really doing its job, or the people milling the olives are not doing their job.
So then, what makes a winning oil in competition?
So the oils at the moment that are winning competitions are very aromatic, have intense smells and complexity and persistence, pretty much like you would describe a great wine. Complexity, persistence, intensity. To some extent, some of the more subtle oils, which can be wonderful, are penalised because of this trend for very dramatic, very aromatic oils. But this is beginning to change, and I'm really pleased to see that in some competitions, some of the subtler oils are beginning to come to the surface. And when we're tasting those oils, we also start thinking, are the general public going to like these softer, gentler oils than us guys who like these bitter, pungent oils? Both of which have different uses. But it's very important when we're judging in a competition to remember what normal people, as it were, would like.
So in some sense, if I can draw another analogy to the world of wine, you want to judge a Pinot Noir based on the characteristics that a Pinot Noir should have, which tend to be lighter and a little bit less intense than, say, a Cabernet.
Yes. Yeah.
And you want to be sensitive to that and not penalize a Pinot Noir for being a Pinot Noir.
Yes, exactly. Again, in Japan, when they give us the oils, it doesn't just tell us the variety, but it also tells us what the producer thinks he has made. Does he think it's delicate, or she think it's delicate, or medium, or robust? And that will prepare us, to some extent, our palates. Sometimes we think they get it wrong, and some producers who are used to very robust oils will describe it as a medium, and we will sometimes disagree with them. But the important thing to realize, I'm obsessed with this, is how much variety there is out there and how many different uses there are. So robust oils can sometimes be really quite bitter, but on the right food served at the right temperature, they can be spectacular. whereas in a salad they might be a little bit too robust. So each variety, each kind of olive oil can be used in a different way.
And why does the temperature matter so much? You just said that heated up plate of food can do something.
Yeah, it is surprising to me that people don't talk about bitterness more in olive oil. I think they're a bit afraid. There are some areas, for example, in Italy where most of the oil that they produce is bitter. They're used to it. But people who come from other countries will buy these oils, take them home, put them on the salad and think, geez, this cost me whatever, and this salad now is a bit too bitter. So I all over and over again tell people that if you have one of those bitter oils, it can be fantastic on food when the temperature is high. So a soup with beans, for example, or a steak taken off the grill on the plate and immediately put this bitter oil on top, and the heat of the steak will bring the bitterness down, or the heat of the soup will bring the bitterness down, and you will taste miraculous flavors that you had never had before.
That is such a fascinating thing to think about, and it opens up really a whole new world for olive oil, because you start to think about how you can pair it with different foods. And as an expert, do you have maybe like a top 3 pairing that you would like to share with the viewers?
I've just mentioned bitterness, so bitterness is probably the most intriguing of the combinations. It can be quite extreme, but a bitter oil on a dish of white beans, or if you eat meat, on a steak, when those two ingredients are hot, the bitter oils give so much flavor, but they also enhance flavor. They bring out the flavor of the meat or the flavor of the beans. Another oil food combination which I adore, which is best obviously in Italy, is buffalo mozzarella. If you can get hold of a nice one of those, plus the citrana oil, which I keep talking about, which is a very tomatoey one, that is a fantastic combination. And kind of in between these oils would be a picual from Spain, which is a very tomatoey kind of tomato leaf, quite intense oil. Is great in a soup with chickpeas, garbanzos, and rosemary and garlic and pasta e ceci. Very good.
Cool. We don't have any of that coming out, do we?
Unfortunately, we don't.
No, that all sounds amazing, and hopefully we get to do a video where we try some of those things at some point down the road.
We will definitely do some pairings, yeah.
But just to give everyone an idea, like how rich is this world? How deep does it go? How many varieties are we talking about?
So I used to live in Italy for 38 years, and Italy is the country where there are the most varieties of grape types, and in this case olive types. It looks like Italy has got, for some reason the figure is quite precise, 638 different varieties, more than any other country in the world by far, and in the world possibly 1,400. Wow. But Italy is the place where each village sometimes has its own variety. So obviously not all of these are incredibly different one from the other, but a lot of them are very different, and you can have flavor profiles that are really quite surprising, like strawberry or raw peas, tomatoes, like I've mentioned, raw artichoke. Different varieties having extraordinary different flavors and smells.
Are we talking about exclusively the Mediterranean here, or are other countries starting to get into olive oil business as well?
It's very exciting to me that people who literally I have met, who came to Italy to, as it were, to some extent, learn a little bit about how to make olive oil from me and from Italian producers. People from California are now winning some of the top prizes in the world. So it's so exciting that the States, which produces a tiny amount of olive oil, are beginning to make great oils just as they make great wines. There, the production is tiny and not a lot of it is available, and of course it's not cheap. But it's really encouraging to see people doing so well there. South America, of course. So it's a bit, you can, if you follow wine, you can pretty well follow with olive oil. It's the same kind of Mediterranean environment where you can grow the olives. So South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, South America, obviously. And now other countries are beginning to grow them too. But in the Mediterranean, strangely, probably the most exciting country in the Mediterranean, although it's a tiny one at the moment in terms of wins in competitions, is Croatia.
All right. Represent. For those who don't know, I am Croatian. Just a funny coincidence there.
Yeah, yeah. They really care and they're really making great oil.
Well, next time I'm down there, I'll have to bring you a bottle.
That would be really cool to taste it.
What's our key message or key takeaway? Be curious, discover this world. What would you say to the people who are you've piqued their interest here today?
Yeah.
Where do they go from here?
I keep drawing parallels with wine, but just like with wine, here you need to spend a little bit more. You know, you can't expect a great olive oil for $1 a bottle. It's going to have to be at least 15, I would say. I mean, I don't know the prices in the States. So once you've got into the good oils, and not necessarily are the ones that cost more going to be better, but once you've started smelling these fresh, intense, exciting oils, you will start to realize that you can start playing games with these different oils, with different foods. And once that happens, you will become like an addict, like I am.
And I think I'm slowly trending that way as well after a few conversations with you. But given the varieties that are out there, the infinite pairings with food that we can start to play around with, I mean, is it fair to say that this is a culinary renaissance just hiding in plain sight?
I think that it's going to explode. I'm surprised that most chefs haven't got it yet. Most chefs will buy possibly one cheap oil to cook with and use in whatever way. Some of them are beginning to realize they can use them to finish their dishes with. And some are even putting tiny bottles on the table, which you pay for, and rightly so, because they're quality oils. But mostly chefs are not getting it yet. They will discover it, and I think it will be like opening a little cupboard in the kitchen and finding a whole load of new spices and herbs that they've never had before. And they will start playing games with them and get very excited with what they can do.
Well, let's hope that day comes sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a fan after everything that we've talked about.
Good.
So if you liked what you saw here, Johnny and I intend to have more conversations like this. Subscribe, give us a follow, and let us know what you think. And where does this one sit, this particular bottle, on the bitterness scale? And
it's a little bit bitter. It's not high bitterness, but you can feel a little bit on your tongue. You don't like IPA, right? But is it the bitterness, or is it just the sort of general?
It's all the other kind of floral qualities that
much.
are, yeah.
It's not like real beer.
It's not beer.
Yeah. You're wrong, but so the bitterness is, I would say, kind of medium-low bitterness for a piquois. And the pepperiness also is like medium-high. It's a bit peppery, but it's not overwhelming. It's very balanced and fresh and intense. And there are nice flavors of like tomato leaf. In Spain, they often talk about fig leaf, which is not something a lot of people are aware of, but there's a bit of that is typically piquois. Maybe even raw artichoke. But the important thing is, do you like it? Do you want to use it? Is it inviting you to use it? It smells, I think, inviting. And then you just try it on all sorts of food, and it's spectacular.
Well, I think I'm hooked.
Good.